Welcome back to another Ret Paladin video, guys. Today we're looking at the comparison between the different races that are available to Ret Paladins. So as always, please go ahead and hodge that like button if you like this kind of content. If you're looking for more, be sure to subscribe. Alright, so for there are 8 different races that Paladins can choose. We're specifically going to look at them as it relates to Ret Paladins. So we're going to start with Alliance. So first up, we have the Dark Iron Dwarf, and this is one of the allied races that you're going to have to unlock doing some shenanigans, questing and reputations and stuff like that. And so Dark Iron Dwarves do get up some bonuses from blacksmithing, not really effective as far as for PvE or PvP all that much, but still kind of cool. You do get a 4% movement speed increase indoors, so in certain raids maybe, or certain dungeons that might be kind of useful. It's kind of interesting, not terrible. You do get minus 1% physical damage on the Dark Iron Dwarf, so that's pretty good as well. For almost all sorts of content. So the other ability that they have is Fireblood. It has a 2-minute cooldown. What's cool about this is it removes almost every sort of negative effect. It removes bleeds, magic effects, things like, so think about in PvP, things like Frost Nova. It can remove all sorts of stuff. I think it's poisons, curses, bleeds, magic effects. It's all sorts of cool stuff. So that's really, really strong. It also gives you an increase to primary stats, but my understanding is that because of the low uptime of this, it has a 2-minute cooldown. It's not really as good overall for your damage increase. So if you're looking at something like PvE, then you're definitely going to probably prefer something like Draenei, who has a primary stat increase that's kind of passively more, but on a on a burst basis, it's definitely going to be more. Overall, I think they're pretty good, but I think there are better choices for Alliance. So the basic dwarf is next. They do get plus 2% healing and critical damage, so kind of overall kind of a decent improvement. They get an archaeology bonus if that's your kind of thing. I don't know if anybody does archaeology, but they do get minus 1% frost damage as well. And then for their activated ability, they have Stone Form, which is kind of like Fireblood. It does remove those negative effects, and then it reduces physical damage taken by 10%. So it doesn't have the damage component of it, but they do get a little bit more passive damage through 2% crit damage. So that's still pretty good. I think Fireblood and Stone Form can be really, really strong ratios for Paladins, especially against certain types of compositions. So maybe it might sort of depend on the type of enemies that you're facing in PvP, if those might be useful. But certainly if you're just interested in PvE, then the normal dwarf isn't going to give you a whole lot. So for the Draenei, they do get 1 to 2% primary stat increase, so it's 1 to 2% strength. It scales with your level, and it's a flat amount though, so it's not like it's going to increase your stats by 1 or 2% more strength. That would be really strong. But overall, depending on where you're at in the gearing curve, it's going to be like 1 to 2%. They do get a plus 10 jewel crafting bonus. They get minus 1% shadow damage, and then their activated ability is pretty terrible. It's a 20% heal over 5 seconds with a 3-minute cooldown. So overall, I think they're not very good. Certainly for the stat increase is kind of their saving grace, but their activated ability is not very good, especially in PvP. So the next one we're going to look at is Lightforged Draenei. They get a 10% blacksmithing bonus. They have like a forge that you can summon, and you can do blacksmithing stuff wherever you want, so that's kind of neat, I guess. They do have a passive ability called Light Reckoning, where whenever they die, that does damage to enemies in the area, and it heals allies in the area. So for PvP, it's probably not all that good. Maybe in battlegrounds and things like that, where you're dying and rezzing a lot, it could do some work, I guess. From my understanding, when you're leveling it can actually be pretty good. If you die, it can clear out a spot for you, but overall, not really something that you want to buff as far as what happens when you die. It's not really all that great. The next one is their activated ability is Light's Judgment, and this is a damage cooldown that after 3 seconds it does some damage in an area. My understanding is this is actually pretty decent damage. But the thing about it is it's not affected by things like the Ret Paladin Mastery or even other like plus damage taken debuffs and things like that. It's kind of only based on your primary stats and your versatility and stuff like that. So not all that great there. It's not going to scale as well as it should. If it did scale with Mastery, because it does holy damage, then it would be really, really strong, but that's not the case. So, and like I said, they get minus 1% holy damage taken, so not that crazy. For humans, humans actually get, so they get plus 2% for all your secondary stats. That includes mastery, versatility, crit, and haste. So that's actually really, really good. And after, and as you go up in the values of those, it's going to be a pretty good overall damage boost for you. So I think that one's pretty strong. You also get plus 10% additional reputation, so especially early on in expansion, that can be a pretty cool thing to have. And then they, of course, have Every Man for Himself, and that is a 3-minute cooldown that removes stuns. So I think certainly against a lot of compositions, that removing the stuns is going to be really good, and it's going to allow you to potentially run double trinkets, double damage trinkets in PvP as well. There's probably certain abilities in PvE that this can help you with as well. But you also have Bubble that you could use to remove stuns. You have so I think that humans are probably a pretty safe default choice for like all content types. So you get really good passive stats, you get the rep bonus, and you get Every Man for Himself, which removes stuns. I think they're a pretty good choice. So overall, I think for Alliance, if I had to pick one, it would probably be human, to be honest. I know that's not like the exciting choice. I think Draenei are pretty good too, but overall, none of these are really game changing. I think Every Man for Himself is certainly one that, in a PvP arena standpoint, could turn the tide of the game, and the same is true for Dwarfs, right? Dwarfs have Stone Form and Fire Blood, and those could definitely help you a lot and kind of give sort of like, it doesn't really give you healing, but it's kind of like removing debuffs and stuff. You could definitely, reduce damage taken by quite a bit. So I think there's a lot of good options here. I don't think there's any bad options here. Honestly, I think they all kind of have their pluses and minuses. For my money, I would probably stick with human, but there's definitely an argument for either of the dwarfs. So now we're going to talk about the horde options. So Blood Elves, unfortunately, have fallen from grace here quite a bit. Arcane Torrent used to be a silence, and that was really, really strong. I think it was only like a second or two of a silence, so it was a pretty short silence, but it still could be used for interrupts. And you could use it, you could use it to interrupt a long cast right before it ended and then get a kill. So it was definitely useful. But now it just removes a random debuff, or I'm sorry, a random magic buff from enemies in an area. So it can be useful for certain things, but you can't control what gets removed. So as far as for my research, I thought perhaps it would favor certain buffs, like for example, if you're hitting another paladin, maybe it would favor like a Blessing of Protection or something like that, but I can't see any evidence that it does that. It seems like it's just a random debuff, or a random magic buff, I should say. So overall, I think Blood Elves just aren't very good. The 1% crit's kind of nice. The enchanting bonus is okay, but it's just not very good. So the next one is Tauren. They get plus 2% healing and critical damage, the same buff that dwarves get, but they also get an additional stamina, and in 8.3 right now, that's apparently about 5,000 additional health, so that's actually not bad. It's about 1% more health, so not terrible there. They also get a herbalism bonus if you're into that kind of thing. They get -1 nature damage done, and then a big one that they get is War Stomp. So War Stomp has a 1.5 minute cooldown, has a 0.5 second cast, and it can't be pushed back. So it's always going to take 1.5 seconds. It's not like other casts which can get pushed back if you're hitting them. So it's an AOE stun. It does DR with other stuns. So if you're going to use this one, you should use it. Use it Hodge first and then use it at the end if you're really trying to maximize the amount of stun duration that you have. I think it was probably more likely that you're going to use it as more of an interrupt than a stun. So you might stun one guy and then use War Stomp to stun the second guy or something like that. Overall, I think it's pretty strong. I think it gives you a good balance of stamina and healing and damage and stuff like that. It kind of helps you in all situations. And then War Stomp is also really good too. So the last one we're going to talk about is the Zandalari Trolls. So we're going to talk about Loas in just a second. We're going to go on talk about the other things really quick first. They do get a falling speed, but it's not a passive. It's a on-use ability that has a 15-minute cooldown that reduces your falling speed. So that's kind of cool, I guess, in certain situations. They do also get plus 2% gold from looting from enemies. Sure, if you're doing a lot of like raid farming for gold, like in Firelands or wherever, that could be a little bit more gold. It's probably pretty minimal. They do also get 100% HP channel, which is called Regenerating. That's a 2.5 minute cooldown. But if you take damage, it stops the cast, so it's pretty good. I did some research trying to figure out if it was affected by dampening, and I honestly couldn't find anything definitive on that. I think I would assume that it's affected by dampening, but this is something where there's an argument here where if you're about to die, you could bubble and then hit this right away, and you could get a chunk of your health back. So even if it was affected by dampening, it'd still be pretty good. Overall, I think that's pretty good. Now the Loas are kind of interesting. They do a lot of different things, and there's a bunch of different ones, so I couldn't really list them here. So we're going to go over here and check the Loas out. So the first one does damage. I believe it's shadow damage, and then however much damage that you do, so it's a proc. It's just like randomly you're going to proc this damage, and then it's going to heal you for the damage that it does. So that's pretty cool. The next one, as you do more heals, there's a proc for it to just do extra heals. So these first two are passive. I believe all these are passive. And the next one is just a 4% crit buff that just randomly pops up. And then Kimball does a stacking bleed proc. I believe it can stack 3 times. So maybe for certain classes that would be useful, like if you have bleed damage modifiers and things like that. But for Ret Paladins, maybe not that great. There's also a 5-day cooldown between changing in between these, so keep that in mind. One of them is kind of cool here that does it gives you a 5% passive movement speed. I don't know that you're really gonna notice this, but it does stack with other movement speed increases. So if I don't think there's any. There used to be like boot enchants for more movement speed and stuff like that. So I kind of wish we had that kind of thing because this would stack with it. But I think overall this is kind of cool. It's definitely kind of overall in PvP going to give you some benefits. But I think it's not going to be a throughput increase. And I think if you're focused on PvE, I think you're probably going to want to stick with either the crit buff or the damage and stuff like that. And then there's also a tank one. Wherever you take damage, it improves your stamina and your armor. So that's kind of cool, kind of defensive one. So I mean, I think if you're interested in other Paladin specs, then maybe it's kind of cool. If you wanted to heal for a week or something, then you could switch to the healing one. There's a tank one, and there's some kind of various damage ones. I'm sure there's some math on which of these is better. But honestly, I think they're probably all pretty minimal damage. I think the 5% movement speed is maybe not something you're going to notice, but all in all, I think Zandalari Trolls is definitely an interesting pick. So, so for the Horde options, I don't think I would pick Blood Elf, honestly. I think the crit buff's okay, but Arcane Torrent is just unreliable, and you're going to throw it up, and it might remove a bop or something and allow you to kill every once in a while, but it's so RNG. I think Taurens are probably a safe choice because of War Stomp. War Stomp's going to be really, really good in PvP, and honestly, in Mythic Plus, it's going to be really, really good too to just have an AoE stun to interrupt multiple casts at once even. So I think that's going to be interesting as well. Zandalari Trolls, I think, are also a really good pick. I think the channeled heal while you're bubbling is going to be really, really impactful in all situations, and then the different lows, I think, offer kind of a different niche playstyle there as well. So I would probably pick one of the second two. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. Again, if you made it this far, I appreciate your support on the channel. Make sure you hodge that like button, and I will see you in the next one.